because you have to build up a resistance, but sometimes it does affect you. We're human beings. Human beings are social creatures. We learn from one another. That is what human nature is. We learn from one another. Everything we know is learned from others. Right? We learn from what others do and say more than we learn from reading something. So we humans mimic. Have you noticed that if I smile at you, you will smile? It's just a natural reaction. The brain is tuned to do that. So stop projecting the future. Change tact. Jump ship. Come over to the positive side. Get out of the negativity. Stop talking to negative people. Go and sit with some positivity. This comes with a light of its own, so you don't really need that light.
Less stress.
Less stress.
Sure.
Once I was in, when I was Imam in America, it was the 27th night. So we said what we'll do is that we will put the lights down, dim the lights for the dua, because it just makes it a bit more spiritual. So immediately somebody said, brother, this is a bid'ah. I said, how is it a bid'ah? Because in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, they would never have had this much light. This is a bid'ah, to be honest. Right? In the time of the Prophet, they would have a few lamps here and there. And that would have been the default. So people sometimes, when they're not used to something, they call it a bid'ah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الإنسان خلق هلوعا إذا مسه الشر جزوعا وإذا مسه الخير منوعا إلا المصلين الذين هم على صلاتهم دائمون والذين في أموالهم حق معلوم للسائل والمحروم. Then eventually Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says أولئك في جنات مكرمون. So what we're talking about is mental health. Mental health is a very serious term, and it's a term which evokes various different concepts and ideas in somebody's head. There could be people who are suffering from certain things which clinically have been designated as a mental problem, and thus it becomes a mental health problem. But as soon as people hear mental health, then we start thinking of crazy people. And while the idea of mental health, or people who are mental, or as the colloquial style of using that term is, people who are crazy or insane or madmen, they were people who were probably schizophrenic, or people who really had no control over themselves. Not depressed people necessarily. So generally when we speak about mental health, for most people who have not looked at it clinically, they understand this to be some kind of insanity and craziness. And that's why, while now mental health includes things like clinical depression and other things which you probably wouldn't even be able to tell that somebody, from the normal understanding of being crazy, or, I mean, not saying anybody with mental health is crazy, but what people would have generally thought is a mental problem doesn't seem to be that one. That's why what I would suggest is that when we're dealing with the common people, and somebody has been clinically designated to have a mental health problem, you shouldn't tell people that this is a mental health problem, because unless you can explain to them what you mean. Otherwise immediately they're going to think you're crazy. And that's a problem. This is why it becomes difficult. And to be honest, they probably should have figured out some other term for it, rather than the word mental, because it would have an overarching term, a psychological problem. That sounds a bit better, maybe. Right? That just makes it easier for people to understand. Oh, okay, it's a cycle, but you're not crazy, they say. Right? So how can you have a mental health problem? This is just what people think. But anyway, when people talk about depression, this is a very loaded term, what depression means. Some people are just going through a temporary phase where they've just suffered a loss and they're feeling that the whole world has caved in on them. They don't see, or maybe they've just had several shortcomings, several setbacks, several losses. Maybe they've tried 1, 2 or 3 different businesses and it didn't work and they lost a huge amount of money. Or they got married once and then twice again and nothing happened, even though they did istikhara in their way. They did an istikhara but nothing happened. So now they suddenly start feeling as if the whole world is against them. Okay, that's okay, you can still deal with that. But then they start feeling, if they have iman to start with, they actually start feeling like God has forsaken them. Allah has abandoned them. That's when it gets even more critical, because then you start losing your faith. The very thought, the very belief that you need to have some kind of sanity in this life, feeling of security, a feeling of comfort, being looked after, has to come through Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Once you start thinking Allah has abandoned you, then that shaitan rides the wave. So a lot of the time it's a temporary issue that we've just misjudged, misinterpreted and looked at negatively because the shaitan caused us to look at it like that. Sometimes it's not the shaitan only, it's because of our ignorance. Unless we can say that is shaitan induced as well. It's our ignorance that we're not aware of the various different names of Allah, characteristics of Allah, and thus we feel abandoned even if we're not supposed to be abandoned. So there's quite a few things here that, and hopefully I'm going to try to clarify this. I hope you're not lost already, because there's quite a few different things that I just wanted to express. So that's the phase, where somebody's just going through a phase. But then you have somebody who is supposedly clinically depressed. They've been diagnosed as depressed by a doctor or by experts. Now, I don't want to challenge the judgment of experts, but these people, there are some of these people who do a lot of praying. They're doing lots of adhkar. They're reading a lot of the Quran. They're even doing ruqya, and nothing's happening. They're not getting much out of it. They're getting, but it's spiritually, but it's not removing their depression. So sometimes what we have to recognize is that, for example, if you've got a broken arm or a broken knee, right? Unless you've got the tawakkul of Ibrahim alayhi salam, where he's on his way into the fire, and the angel is asking him, do you need help? And he's saying, I don't need your help. Allah knows what's going on. He's aware, and I leave it to him. That's proper rada bil qada. Satisfaction with Allah's decrees regardless what happens. Regardless of what happens. Very difficult. I remember in one of the great scholars of the subcontinent, whose name is, his name is Imdadullah, but they refer to him as Haji Imdadullah because he moved to Makkah Mukarramah, and he was one of the greatest of the Indian shuyukh that many people may be aware of. On one occasion, he, rahmatullahi alayhi, became sick, he became ill. And he said, I'm not going to make dua to Allah to remove this illness from me. I'm just going to do full rada bil qada. Rada means satisfaction. Qada means with the decree of Allah. I'm going to be just fully satisfied with Allah's decree. He knows I'm sick. Sickness came from him. I'm just going to let him keep me sick as long as he wants. And if he wants to give me cure, I'll let him. I'm not even going to say, oh Allah, give me cure. Can you see what I'm saying? For us, when we get sick, oh Allah, if we do get the tawfiq to do dua, then we're saying, oh Allah, cure me, Allahumma shfini. And there's nothing wrong with that. For most people, that's what they will do. And this is what the Prophet ﷺ, he gave us du'as for shifa. So there's nothing wrong with that. You're still connecting to Allah. But he said, look, my connection with Allah, I think is good, and he understands my situation. I just want to be fully his slave. He can keep me as he wishes. So it took a few months, but he was cured after that. But that's something which majority of us will not be able to do. That's and the ulama like Fudayl ibn Iyad, they mention that this is actually for the elite, for people who have a very high level of tawakkul, such a connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that they can literally take this gamble, you can say, to a certain degree, if you want to call it that. For the rest of us, we ask for patience if we have a trouble. And if we don't have a trouble, then like Imam Ghazali said, if you don't have a problem, ask for afiyat, ask for well-being. Don't even ask for patience, because the patience from calamities, if you ask for that and your dua is accepted, you'll have a calamity and have a lot of patience. It happened once, personal story. We were in Hajj, 4 or 5 of us, and we went to Jabal al-Rahma. We left the camp and went to Jabal al-Rahma. And one of us was making dua from a book, and he had this long dua on sabr. So, made the dua, and then after that, there was one brother who was spending on behalf of everybody, because everybody was saying, you're our bank, so you will spend. And the rest of us had our own money. So one person, he had, if I remember correctly, $2,300 that was in his belt. You know, the ihram belt you get. And it had a zipper on it. So it was zipped up, and in the they had two pockets. $2,300 there, which is about maybe 1,900 pounds. And on the other hand, he had maybe some loose riyals or something that he had to give for sadaqah. So he hadn't been he hadn't been taking from that money, because the other brother was spending on behalf, then they were just going to pay him afterwards. So for 3 days, during his ihram, he didn't look at anything. From the first day, the 8th, the 9th, in Arafah. Only on the 10th, on the 3rd day, when they went to do the jamarat, the first stoning on the 10th, that's when he decided, look, I've got this money, and he saw these poor people, he said, let me give this sadaqah. And now remember, this belt is zippered, he's got 2 folds of ihram on top, and it's tight. So where's that money going to go? He checks, and the money is gone. The money is gone. From under 2 folds of ihram and the zipper, it's gone. They're very professional down there. And most likely it probably went when he was doing tawaf by the Kaaba. Unfortunately, that's because that's where the biggest crowd is, and that's the easiest place to pickpocket, unfortunately. And unfortunately, there are people who do this, and I don't know how they can, subhanallah. Sometimes we get worried, even if you're talking to somebody and you start getting a bit casual in your discussion, you're like, how can you feel guilty even like that? But anyway, but the amazing thing is that was all of his money, and he basically lost it all, but he had, mashallah, a great sense of calmness. He didn't feel that this is the end of the world or whatever. He lost his money, okay, it's gone. The others helped him out then anyway. But then one of the other brothers reminded him that, remember that big dua that you were making on Mount Arafah about sabr? I did not say Ameen to that one. Right? Now, I just want to clarify that is because if you're asking for sabr for musibat, for calamity, then that's the one we're talking about. But there are 2 other types of sabr that we actually do much more often. In fact, on a regular basis. And for that, you can ask for sabr. So whenever you do ask for patience from these other 2 categories for which we need to ask for patience. And what are the other 2 categories? So there are 3 things humans do sabr for, right? One is when you have a calamity, oh Allah, give me the ability to bear it, to tolerate this. That's why we generally tell people to do sabrun jameel, beautiful patience. Beautiful patience. So a person is acting in still a very dignified way, an honorable way, even though they've lost somebody. The other 2 types of patience is sabr ala ta'ah, which basically means all the deeds that we have to do, that we are instructed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to pray on time and so on. All of that is sabr ala ta'ah. The fact that you've prayed in the masjid as opposed to going somewhere else. The fact that you have done a few other things. It's the same. All of these things are sabr ala ta'a, making wudu with cold water in the morning. Sabr anil ma'siyah, then, on the other hand, is the third type, which is to stay away from haram. I can't eat from McDonald's. I can't go and date the way there's this beautiful person at work. I can't date. It's haram. That's sabr anil ma'siyah, and we need a lot of this sabr. That's our perseverance, that's our deen. So anyway, let's move on to our topic, that there's a clinical depression which we need to start recognizing. Because, for example, if I've got an auntie there's somebody in my family who's supposedly clinically depressed. And everybody just tells her, you should read this dua, and you should read that dua, and everything. And she's mashallah very righteous from before. She does Quran khatam, she does her salat, she does everything. She does more than an average person, I would say. But she's still suffering from this. So sometimes this stuff is related to a chemical imbalance. And we have to start recognizing that fact. So unless your tawakkul is like what I mentioned before, you need to get help from the right. Not everybody unfortunately has that kind of tawakkul. So I give you an example. The local police, we have a relationship with them. So once the brother who's in contact with them, he called me and he said that there's been an incident in the area. And the incident was that there was this, I think she was Somalian or Bangladeshi woman who has killed her children, carved out their parts of their internal organs, her own children. And nobody's been told about this yet. We're keeping it hush, but we want to understand this because we've checked her computer, we've checked around, and we're finding all of these readings. So what it was is that she had ruqya everywhere. She had ruqya everywhere. I think she was from a Salafi background, and she had numerous Quran-based ruqyas and other things. Even on her computer, around the wall, everywhere. She was clearly reading a lot of this. She still ended up doing this. I'm not trying to say Quran doesn't work, but there's a way you have to have tawakkul in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But Allah has told us to use shifa sometimes, to use a cure, and there's nothing wrong with doing that. Her problem was not a jinn problem. Her problem was not a magic problem. Her problem was not an ayn problem. Ayn nazar as they call it, evil eye, that was not her problem. That's what she thought it was. It was a chemical imbalance in the brain. So she ended up doing this. So alhamdulillah, we managed to consult with them, and that's why the whole thing was kept. It wasn't blown out of proportion. They didn't feed it to the media, although you should have heard about it. Right? It was quite a crazy thing because the husband didn't know, and then when he came back, you can imagine, one is you kill yourself, one is you just kill somebody. This is carving them out. She's gone really crazy. They put her in hospital. After 3 months, she was fine. When they gave her the right chemicals and so on, she was fine. So I'm not trying to say that the Quran doesn't work, but sometimes if you've broken your arm, you don't just pray Quran. You pray Quran and then you also try to get it sorted out, because it's not going to magically just get into place unless you've got some, mashallah, the Prophet ﷺ's karamat and mu'jiza, because that has happened. The Prophet ﷺ took his saliva, put in Ali radiallahu anhu's eye, and it got sorted. Other wounds and they got sorted, but unfortunately we just don't have people who can do that kind of stuff. You don't find them everywhere, otherwise they'd have a big line outside their house, right? So, having said that, what I want to clarify is that most problems, most anxieties, most forms of concerns and even depression, if you want to call it that, because I think depression, unless you say it's clinical depression, what I feel depressed. You can feel depressed, you're not going to be clinically depressed, you're just going through a phase. So you just have to use that word carefully. What we have to understand is how to deal with the normal everyday, because there'll be less people who will be clinically depressed than people who are just depressed because of a bad event, as I mentioned, a shortcoming, a problem, an issue. So in Arabic, the word for that is hala. That's one idea. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the verse I mentioned, which is Surah Al-Ma'arij, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ خُلِقَ هَلُوعًا. The man has been created anxious. Man has been created with anxiety. Anxiety is the thing that human beings can suffer from. It can come over anybody. Many of us feel anxious, but it's about how we deal with it. He is fretful إِذَا مَسَّهُ الشَّرُّ جَزُوعًا وَإِذَا مَسَّهُ الْخَيْرُ مَنُوعًا. This is how humans are. He is fretful in bad times, and then when he becomes good, he's miserly. Right? So that's the dealing with things negatively, in both states. But not those who are regular in their prayers. Those people who are regular in their prayers, doing them properly, they will be able to avoid most forms of depression. The anxiety and the fretfulness. They will be able to avoid, because there are 3 ingredients that you need, spiritual ingredients that you need to be able to deal with anxiety. And people who have those 3 qualities will do much better than others. Let's just say there's a business that has just taken a hit, somehow or the other. 3 partners, or 2 partners. One is depressed, can't handle it, right? Can't get out of bed, can't get out of the room, just completely freaked out. The other one is like, okay, what's the big deal? What's the big deal? We'll deal with this. It's just money. I've been told about people, for example, we've had some really bad experiences in history. For example, we've had the experience of Burma, not the recent, but when the Muslims were there, and they were filthy rich. The amount of wealth they say is that they literally had storerooms to put their cash in. It was just crazy amounts of money. I don't know if anybody here is from that time. This was in probably 1950s, 60s, probably early 70s maybe. Overnight, that currency was devalued, and literally they had to run with whatever they could take with them in a suitcase. Overnight. That happened in Burma, it happened in Uganda, and it happened in some other countries, right? In the Uganda, there's a friend of mine who's from that time. He says he still knows others who were very wealthy in Uganda had to run away, and even though it's been 30, 40 years, they're still suffering. They're still suffering. They were not always rich. They became rich. Then they lost it all. And they're still suffering because they lost that. Come on, get over it. Allah's given you more now. Focus, you can make the same amount. If Allah gave you the barakah there, why can't He give it to you again? That's why we're told that whenever you suffer something, what is the dua when you lose something? We take that like a magic dua, like we say, Inna lillahi wa inna ilaihi raji'un, read Inna lillahi and you'll find it again. It's not really for that, you know that. When you lose something, we say Inna lillah, the dua is not to find it again. That's what most of us, that's what I was brought up thinking. So I would read it, but in the idea that this is going to come back. But that's not what it's for. It's the meaning of Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un, which basically means Inna lillah, we are indeed for Allah. We belong to Allah ourselves, and to Him we're going to return. Something happened with my laptop, God forbid, it feels bad, but if that's gone today, I'm going tomorrow anyway. So what difference does it make? It's just gone a bit earlier than me, right? But I can get something else. It's just to create this sense of control in ourselves, that I'm going to be gone, I better worry about that. If this is gone and this is how I feel, imagine how I'm going to feel when I'm gone. If I feel so bad when I lose something, imagine when I'm going to lose everything and I can't take anything with me. It's to evoke those kind of ideas in our minds. So, there are 3 qualities that you need to be able to deal with everyday situations. And a person will deal with them. And these 3 are the qualities to do with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What are the 3 qualities? Number 1, tawakkul. Reliance in Allah. That from Him comes everything. And He is the supplier of everything. to understand that Allah is in control and I can only rely on Allah. Because once we start, you see, it's a simple idea. If you have good support around you and you go through a problem, but you have good support, doesn't it make you feel comfortable? Doesn't it make you feel more confident? If I've lost something, lost someone, but mashallah there's people around me condoling me and saying, don't worry, we're here for you, we'll take care of you, you need anything, let us know. And then there's a person who has nothing, he's lost and he doesn't know how to. Can you imagine the difference between those two things? Now the ultimate source of all assistance and all goodness is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if a person can feel just the same as when they have people that I can rely on them, if they can feel that I can rely on Allah because everything eventually comes from Him, then that's what we mean tawakkul. Number two, we need to understand the concept of patience. The concept of patience, sabr, is one of the most rewarded and meritorious acts of Islam. The reason why fasting is so meritorious, huge amount of reward, that Allah says that the angels are not going to write the reward for it, I'm going to directly write the reward for it. Why? Because fasting is all patience. It's abstinence. I'm not going to eat, I'm going to be patient, I'm not going to eat, no drink, no sexual intercourse, I'm not going to do this, I'm not going to do that. That's pure, the essence of it is sabr. And Allah says in the Quran, وَبَشِّرِ الصَّابِرِينَ. This is so wonderful. Allah really uses the words here, say, give glad tidings to those who are patient. And then He doesn't leave it at that. He explains how you have patience. الَّذِينَ إِذَا أَصَابَتْهُمْ مُصِيبَةٌ. Those whom when a musibah strikes them, when a calamity strikes them, when a difficulty comes upon them, when a hardship is faced by them. الَّذِينَ إِذَا قَالُوا. What do they say? Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. So this dua is from the Quran. Whenever any calamity, whether that's a shortcoming, a setback, a problem, they say inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un, that we are also for Allah and to Him we're going to return eventually. So that's the first thing we must say. Ulaika, then Allah starts showering them. He says, these are the people upon whom is the salawat of Allah, the blessings. Just like Allah sends blessings on the Prophet ﷺ, He sends blessings on people who have salah. قالوا إن أولئك عليهم صلوات من ربهم ورحمة, and upon them is the mercy of Allah. And then Allah says وأولئك هم المهتدون, and these are the truly guided ones, because they have understood what to do when a calamity strikes them, and calamities are part and parcel of this life. Is there anybody here who's never had a calamity? Did you just put your hand up? Somebody who's never had a calamity. You've never had a calamity?
Yeah.
No? No, I'm saying who's never had one. Come on, there must be somebody. No, some of these kids have a calamity. You've never had a calamity. Your parents are probably dealing with it for you. But alhamdulillah. Exactly, whether it's small, medium, minor, it's just how you deal with it, right? Yeah, you have calamities all the time.
I think for a lot of young people during puberty time, there's a lot of calamities that come up.
And then for adults, it's, yeah, and then what about for adults?
They're going from a transition child to adult, and it's a very difficult.
That's a very difficult, but you know, for us adults, you know when it happens for us, when we're intellectually maturing, that puberty time, that's midlife crisis at the age of 40. That's a time when the adults have it. Believe me, they go through some, and then for women it's at menopause. Anyway, khair, that's a different issue. But what I'm saying is that, look, the world, there's going to be calamities, if we can just learn how to deal with them. So how do we deal with calamities? How do we deal with thoughts? Well, let me talk about the so first thing, tawakkul on Allah. Number two, sabr. And number three, as much as possible, as difficult it's an issue, rada bil qada, to be satisfied with Allah's decree. The other day I'm riding back on my bike from teaching to home. It's the most convenient way to travel in London. Takes the same time as it takes 15, 17 minutes, whereas a car could take 17 to half an hour. No parking problems, no tickets. And biking is the only thing that you can incorporate in your life as an exercise without it being, it's the most incorporatable exercise. Going to the gym and all that, running on a treadmill takes time off, right? And if you're a workaholic, you can't do that, so this just takes part of it. Coming back, and one of the worst things for a cyclist is what? Is wind. Rain you can deal with, but wind, it's like you're driving in front of an invisible wall because you can't get anywhere. Now, I wanted to get home quickly that day. It generally takes me 17 or so minutes, and I can't get anywhere. It's going to take me 5 minutes. It's a long stretch, and I just can't, So then what should I do? Should I get aggravated? If I get aggravated, and I get anxiety because of that, where is it going to take me? I may end up doing something crazy, right? The other day I had to give a talk at 11:45. I had to be in the masjid for the talk, but I had an appointment in another area, 25 minutes away, and I just couldn't find parking. And the Waze, the Google, the thing, it was telling me somewhere else, and I didn't know where the Specsavers was, and 20 minutes, and I'm getting really, and then in fact I missed the exits, and I had to do a 6-minute detour, and you can imagine, and I'm thinking, I better be careful because I could end up having an accident if you're going to get angry. If you're going to get angry and actions in that time, you're just going to end up doing something crazy, right? So what you do is you just have to take it easy, like this is from Allah, there must be a reason for this. So likewise I thought, okay, I'm going to get home 10 minutes late. That day I was riding, let me just take it easy. And once you do that, suddenly everything becomes calm and you feel in control. So, Rada bil Qada, satisfied with Allah's decree. There must be a reason in there. I can't tell what it is right now. So now, what are we supposed to do? One of the biggest things that we need to avoid is to stop listening to other people's soap operas. Stop listening and sitting with negative people. There's a clear impact of negative people on others. Somebody I know, his wife, was speaking to somebody in their complex who was going through some marital issues. So every day she's giving the next episode, right? Because that's what people do. It's the next episode of Neighbours, or I don't know, whatever it's called, right? Real life Neighbours, not the one on the... Does Neighbours even come on? I mean, you know what I'm talking about? It still comes on. Oh man, that's like 20 years ago I'm talking about, right? I guess you guys don't know what Neighbours are.
So those who are teenagers are now in their 50s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was never into it, but I know there were some people who used to watch it like faithfully, right? But anyway, Khair, you know what I'm talking about. So this is like real life Neighbours telling you all this saga. He suddenly starts discovering, feeling that his wife is becoming negative, anxious, depressed. And he told her, you need to stop talking to that person. Maybe once in a while to comfort her, it's fine. But all that negativity is affecting this person. We're not supposed to be around negativity. That's why these people who work in hospitals, the psychiatrists and psychologists and therapists, they themselves have a therapist to go to. They're always given therapists to go back to. And they're actually trained to not, And sometimes you have to, we as imams have to deal with a lot of these issues. And sometimes people, if they hear the story that we've just heard, they were like, doesn't that affect you? I said, well, not anymore. Because you have to build up a resistance, but sometimes it does affect you. We're human beings. Human beings are social creatures. We learn from one another. That is what human nature is. We learn from one another. Everything we know is learned from others. Right? We learn from what others do and say more than we learn from reading something. So we humans mimic. Have you noticed that if I smile at you, you will smile? It's just a natural reaction. The brain is tuned to do that. So stop sitting with negative people. If you have to help them, well, help them, but be very careful the way. You don't have to listen to a story every day. So let me now tell you some statistics, which is very important. Because there's a hadith in Abu Dawood in which the Prophet ﷺ warned against staying disturbed and anxious. He said, a dangerous evil in man is the greed of a fretful person and the cowardice of a morally depraved person. So just try to avoid that. These are the statistics which should, inshallah, for a lot of people who have a problem of just being frightened for nothing. Literally, that's what it is. Look at this. Out of all of those things that people are generally concerned about, it's going to happen this way or that way. Right? What's going to happen? Am I going to get this? Am I not going to get this? Am I going to get this job? Am I going to get married here or not? All of those anxieties, this is the statistic in terms of whether what you fear is going to take place or not. If you take everybody's anxieties about something they fear, 40% of the things that we generally worry about that 40% is never going to happen. So right off, straight away, 40% of what we generally are concerned about is not going to happen. Alright, so that's 40% out of the way. Now you've got to deal with 60% now, right? 60% is still a good amount. So there's still something worth being frightened about or anxious about. Now, this is anxiety. This is talking about statistics, anxiety about maybe something of the past, something of the future, any anxiety, okay? So 40% is never going to happen. 30% is related to the past for most people. And that can't be helped anyway. It's like crying over spilt milk. You've already spilt it now. Stop fretting. So 40% is never going to happen. 30% of anxiety that people have is about the past. So there's no point being anxious. That's 70%. We've only got 30% left to worry about. Among that, 12% involves the affairs of others and he's got no business about. Because we're sometimes anxious about what's going to happen to somebody else. Right? Somebody who's not maybe even related, not your son, daughter, brother, sister, father, somebody else. We're anxious about it. This is among the population. So that's 12% gone there. That's 82% finished. How much left? 18%. Right? 18%. Among the 18%, 10% relates to sickness, whether that's real or imagined. That I'm going to become sick or I am sick. A lot of the time we think we're sick because we feel a few symptoms. You go to the doctor and say, no, you have no problem. Then you just suddenly feel good. Right? My mother, who was suffering from cancer for 10 years, rahimahullah, she, alhamdulillah, got better, then it came back, and then what happened is they did the chemotherapy. But until that time, she's, mashallah, even Ramadan, she did 7 Quran khatams in that state. After Ramadan, she'd been having chemotherapy all the way through. After Ramadan, the doctor said, look, this time the chemotherapy has not worked and it's kind of spread. We're saying, don't tell my mother that. Because she's fighting. And in cancer, you need to fight. You need to have trust and you don't need negative information. But I think there's a law, those who are doctors will maybe tell us, there's a law that you must tell them. You can't hide it from them. So as soon as he told them that, I think she finally said, I can't fight this anymore. And then she, from that time, just clearly disintegrated. Clearly went down and started, it was a marked difference. Humans have the ability given by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to fight these things to a great degree. Of course, when the taqdeer of Allah, when the fate of Allah is written, when Allah has written for something to happen, it's going to happen. No doubt about that. But you don't know that it's written. This is where the confusion about the fate comes along. We think that just because I've had 5 weeks of hell, or 2 years of problems, or 20 years of setbacks and problems and I've never succeeded in anything. And you get these people, I've been trying to marry for the last 10 years but it either always breaks up or whatever, and it must be jadoo. And it can't be any other reason. We now think the future has to be like that as well, so we project the back onto the future. Now remember, anything that's already happened, we know that that's what was written, because we figured it out, because we've lived it. So why are people worried about what's written when they don't know? You don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. It's written, yes, it's written. But you don't know it. So why are you worried about it? Then people ask this question, if it's all written, why should we even try? Can you see how absurd the question is? If it's all written, why should we try? You're assuming that what's written is that you shouldn't try. So then why should we try? You see what I'm saying? That's a fallacy. You don't know what's written. It could be written that this is the last time you will do this sin. That's why Ibn Ata'illah rahimahullah, he says that if you've made tawbah and then you've gone back into sin, you've made tawbah, you've gone back into sin, Shaitan then makes you feel like that's the future for you. You will carry on doing that. He said, no, you need to make tawbah. How do you know that the next tawbah you will make will be your final tawbah, and after that it will be the last time that you've committed that sin and you won't do it again. You have to keep trying. Otherwise, Shaitan wants us to stop trying. So, going back to these statistics, 10% relates to the sickness, real or imagined. And only 8% of the things that we worry about are likely to happen. Out of 100%, only 8% are likely to happen. Now, once you know that statistics, I mean, if you're not convinced about anything else, these statistics should help you, right? That look, only 8%. Now, think about that next time. Anybody who's listening and they're worried about something, just understand it's probably 8% chance of what I'm anxious about possibly occurring. 92% of the chance that you're worrying about something that will never happen to you. Some people are so frightened of flying. Even though flying, you would have to, they say you would have to fly for 18 years continuously for the probability of you dying in a flight. Like for 18 years you're constantly on a flight, then you might die. After 18 years, because of the probability. Because flying is apparently safer than car driving. But some people, car drive, they will drive cars but they won't fly. Where does that come from? So, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He gives us numerous things. And let me just talk about one thing before, because the issue of mental health, the issue of depression, the issue of anxiety, especially worried about the future, worried about taqdeer, about what's written, all of that is quite a complex issue that confuses a lot of people. I've already explained the taqdeer to you in a way that yes, everything is written, but you and I, nobody knows what's going to happen. So why do you assume it's going to be negative and then say, why should I bother? Isn't that Shaitan telling us? Do you know it's negative? Haven't you seen so many people who have suddenly turned around and become something else? People who had nothing and suddenly have everything, right? How do you know that it's like that? The other thing we have to realize is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has the characteristic, the attribute of knowledge. That He knows everything from before it even occurs. That's our belief. Because time doesn't apply to Him. This world has been created by someone who's beyond time and space and everything. Right? Because you can't have somebody in time creating that same time, right? So Allah is beyond that. So He knows, and I know this is something we'll never understand, right? And that's fine if you can't understand it. But He knows that what we are going to do. What's your name? Suhaib. Okay. Were you forced to come here today?
No.
Well, even if you were, it doesn't make a difference, but you're not. MashaAllah, you're not. And your name is? Mr. Red? What's your name? You have a name, right? What's his name?
Faris.
Faris. What does Faris mean? MashaAllah. Is that your brother?
Yeah.
So, may Allah bless you both.
Ameen.
And your families and everybody else. So, Allah knew before you came here today that you were going to be here. In fact, He knew that you were going to be here sitting in that exact spot and I was going to be speaking before both of us were born. How? We can't understand that. That's something too complicated for us. For example, it says about paradise that every Friday, people are going to be the most beautiful in paradise already. Every Friday they're going to go to this special event where they're going to see Allah hopefully as well. When they come back from it, Your spouse is going to say, wow, you look so much more beautiful. And you're going to tell the spouse, you look more beautiful than you were last week. And that's going to happen every week. How can you be more beautiful than last week? For every week. And that's for eternity. How is that even conceptually possible in this world? Because eventually you get tired. Like if your wife is wearing new makeup for you every week, eventually she's probably going to run out of ideas and oh, you did that before, right? I mean, what do you do? The world is limited, but that's Allah's ability to do that, right? That is Allah's ability, because paradise is endless. That's why people say, even when you go to a 7-star hotel, if there's such an idea, eventually after 5 days, 10 days, 20 days, you're going to get sick of that place. Ask the princes who live in palaces and they're not allowed to go out because there's a threat. They want to escape. They don't want to be in there. They want to be like us. You get tired of these things. So people then think, how are you not going to get tired in paradise? And the reason is that paradise is dynamic. Paradise is not stagnant. Allah has the ability to enhance it. Every time when you eat an apple, it's going to have a different taste. You're not going to get bored of having, okay, I need to buy now Pink Lady instead of Gala. I mean, the Gala I never eat anymore anyway. Right? Brabants are nice, you know, and Cox apples, they're awful as well now. Right? Because you get bored with these things in this world. But there, it's a new taste every day. It's a smart apple. Okay, you've tasted this taste before, now there's another taste for you. And for each individual person, we understand the concept of smart now, right? It will adjust to each individual. But anyway, we're not talking about paradise. Let's get back to the world. But paradise is important. So where was I before we got there? Allah knows everything, right? That's where we were. Allah knows it because He's got the knowledge. Sometimes your teacher will know most teachers will know what their students will get in an exam. Not because they know the future, but because they know the nature of the person well enough. But Allah knows about what's going to happen to us in a more accurate way. Because for Him, it's as if He's already seen it all. He has in fact seen it all. Because from when we're born to when we die, all of that, Allah already knew from before we were born. And that's very difficult for us to understand because these paradigms are very complex, because we don't have that same ability. So now he wrote that, I forgot your name again. Suhail was going to come here. Right? He wrote that. And then you came here with your free will. Right? Your name is?
Abdullah.
So you came here with your free will. I came here with my free will. It went completely in accordance to what's written in the divine tablet, Allah al-Mahfuz. Is it because I'm forced to do that? No, I did this with my free will because Allah has given us free will. I did it based on my free will. But it also goes in accordance to that because Allah knew what you and I and everybody was going to do with their free will, so that's what He had written. And it wasn't written that He must do this and He must do that. It was written that He will do this with His free will and He will do that with His free will. So now can you see that where we are still, Allah says in the Quran, فَمَنْ شَاءَ فَلْيُؤْمِنْ وَمَنْ شَاءَ فَلْيَكْفُرْ. Whoever wills, they should believe. Whoever wills, they can disbelieve. You have an option. You have free will. You can't deny free will. So, we can't deny free will. We have free will. Allah's given us free will, but He knows everything that's going to happen, so He had it written. So now, if anybody's going to get depressed about the future, they're basically convincing themselves that they know the future. And they know deep down they don't know the future, because nobody does. Just because of what's happened in the past doesn't mean you know the future. So stop projecting the future. Change tact. Jump ship. Come over to the positive side. Get out of the negativity. Stop talking to negative people. Go and sit with some positivity. Read the Quran. And read it with reflection, because that's one of the greatest therapies, to be honest, to deal with negativity. Read the Quran and you will find so many answers, so many heart-touching stories that will be personalized to you, because the Quran is a smart Quran. I could say that. You read it and I read it, and it will answer things for you, and it will also give me things for my own unique situation. The stories are in the Quran are not haphazardly chosen. They've been very specially selected by Allah to provide. They are what you would call very universally applicable stories in there that benefit all of us in our own ways. And you'll only know this if you start reading the Quran with a tarjuma, with a translation, and you'll start understanding what Allah is saying. You will see that He is speaking to you. That's why so many non-Muslims become Muslim, not through seeing other Muslims, but just reading the Quran, that this is, what an amazing book this is, in its own unique style. That is what meant. Salawat on the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Because a lot of the time when you have these anxieties, it's because anxieties. Clinical depression doesn't have to be a punishment. Because there's something I want to clarify to you, that you know when you have a musibat, when you have a calamity, we know that some calamities are a source of purification of sin. Because the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, Al-Anbiya ashaddu nasi bala'an. Prophets are the most tested. Then those who are closest to them. Then those who are closest to them. Right? But then we also know that we're punished sometimes because of sins. So when a calamity comes upon us, how do we know it's because of sin or it's Allah's mercy? How do you tell the difference? Does anybody know? Anybody figure out a way, a testing gadget, an app that you can figure out whether this is a punishment or whether this? So just last week I tweeted out, I found somewhere a very beautiful criteria for this, and I'm going to find it so that I can mention it to you. Right. How do you interpret suffering? Why are you going through a suffering? What is it for us? It depends on how you react. So if a person has a suffering and they start complaining and get impatient and they start getting crazy about it, then it's possibly due to as a punishment. Because if we go through a calamity, remember I told myself the other day when I couldn't find parking and I missed the exit. So if I'm going to start complaining and getting angry and that, maybe this is my punishment. And it probably was a punishment because I did something wrong or something. It may have been a punishment. Right? So if we can't handle it, then it may be a punishment. Number two, if when it happens we realize our shortcomings and it leads us to repentance, astaghfirullah, a'udhu billah, then it may be to purify our sins. A reminder, a guilt feeling to okay, you need to make tawbah. You need to make tawbah and you need to come back to Allah. Number three, when a person has a calamity and the way they react is by saying, you know what, this may be a calamity, but look at how much Allah has given me. For all of this time I've been good, I've had this, I've got that, this is one issue. Then that could be to raise your ranks. Sometimes a person does not have enough deeds and Allah wants to give him a very special place in paradise. He may already be going to paradise, but He wants to give him a special place, a higher upgrade. But He knows that he doesn't have the time to do extra deeds. So He gives him an express ticket, which is by putting a calamity on them and then giving him the patience, and patience has a huge reward. That's why did the Prophet ﷺ, have you read the seerah? The Prophet ﷺ suffered towards the end of his life, last few days. Huge amount of suffering in terms of physical, the fever. Why did he suffer? Doesn't it say that good believers will not suffer in their death? What does that mean then? If the Prophet ﷺ suffered, isn't he the best of believers? So there's two things we need to clarify. A good believer will never suffer the actual death. When the soul is extracted, that will be the most pleasant journey for them. It will be, because then for them death is a gift. Finally I'm away from the world. And when the death experience is taking place, they're feeling a sense of comfort. That's the actual death itself. That they don't feel forsaken, they don't feel depressed at that time, they don't feel lost, they don't feel they're going to miss anybody. They're looking forward. Yes, finally, our flight is going to take off. But the physical problems that you may have to go, the suffering, the physical suffering, sicknesses and so on, that is just to elevate your status. And for the Prophet ﷺ, his status is elevated anyway, but I think his was to show the rest of us. And that's why some ulama say, and maybe this is even from the Prophet ﷺ, that if you are going to feel depressed ever, then remember how the Prophet ﷺ was also had to suffer. If the greatest of mankind had to suffer, then what about the rest of us? I think we just have to get that philosophy right. Then it makes life so much easier. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, these are a few things. I want to stop here. We did talk to our organizer. We did say that maybe we can give time for a few questions, but just a few things. Number one, Imam Allama Rumi, he mentions this really interesting story of this teacher. It was a teacher that was very strict, very principled, very strict, and maybe a bit overly harsh, right? And the teacher said he would never miss a day. Don't you guys try this, okay? It's a very good story, but don't try it. So there's one clever student. He suggested to the other students that when the teacher comes in, what we're going to say is, why are you so pale today? Why you look sick? Why are you so pale today? I hope you're well. Your color is not normal. You might have a fever. Now, teacher's got no fever. He's like this strong military-style teacher who's like, nothing can shake him. So this boy, he explained the plan to all of his other students, the other friends, and said, let's try that. So when the teacher came into the class, so that one day, one student said, how are you, sir? I hope everything's well with you, but your face looks very pale. So immediately, what's the teacher going to say? There's nothing wrong with you. Go and sit down and stop talking rubbish. That's a typical answer that they would give. Now, if you've never been told that by somebody, if somebody plays that joke to you every day, then you're going to ignore it, right? But if nobody's ever played that, the first time somebody actually tells you like that, what are you going to think? While you're going to dismiss it because you don't really have fear, but it's going to create that slight iota of doubt. Then what happened is, the other boy comes in and he says, sir, assalamu alaikum, whatever, how are you? And I say, you look a bit pale today. Are you sick? Again, he says, sit down, like, I'm fine. He's still feeling fine, but now that doubt is 3 or 4 students, and then he actually started feeling fever. So finally what happens is, the teacher is actually now feeling like something is wrong. Mind over matter. He dismissed the class and he went home. When he gets home, so I said, what are you doing here? You never miss school. What are you doing at home? You've come here very early. Now the teacher was actually feeling feverish by this time. And he gets very angry and says, how dare you say that? Don't you see my color and my condition? Even those strangers, those kids are sympathizing with me in my distress, and you got no sympathy for me? And the woman is trying to explain to him that you've got nothing wrong with you, but then he shouts at her and says, bring my blanket, bring my quilt, make me soup, whatever it is. Now, inshallah, nobody plays that joke on us. But I believe this. If enough people tell you something, we humans trust other human beings. Of course, if somebody's crying wolf every day, then that's taken into the equation. So, there's a lot of people, there's one sister I know, one woman older than me, and her husband died. She's an alim, her husband was an alim. And her husband died with 4 children, leaving her 4 children. She's brought them up. And now I've understood how she actually deals with herself. She's never remarried as well. I know several women in my community alone. Now, you may have that here as well. I'm just talking about my community. If I have them in my community, you probably got them in your community, who are divorced and depressed and crazy. In our culture, divorced women are a stigma. They're to blame even though they had nothing, even though the husband had a problem. This is a stigma in our community. Nobody wants to get married. I've got solutions for this, but even those solutions are controversial. So it's no point even bringing that up, because the same women will tell you, no, that's not a solution. It's like, I let your minds wonder about these solutions. But anyway, in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, you had less of this problem. Time of the Prophet ﷺ, a woman got divorced, and there were probably 3 people at her door waiting. To such a degree that Allah had to reveal in the Quran that you're not allowed to explicitly propose until the iddat is over. You can give indication that, okay, when you finish, talk to me about it, right? But you cannot send a proposal while a woman is in iddat. Why did Allah have to say that when nobody wants to even propose to divorced women nowadays? Because that time people were just ready. But of course they were allowed to do more than one in those days, and they had all of these other ways of doing things. So one way that a lot of people have been able to sort out their problem is by helping others. That's an amazing way. When you help others, it's actually shown and demonstrated. If you help others, it takes away your pain and you start doing things for others. Now this particular alima that I know, she is literally, I would say every day she's volunteering somewhere. Whether that's chaplaincy somewhere, whether that's at some function, whether that's cleaning up in somebody's, or going to meet the sick, going to the hospital, every day she's ready to do something. I think that's the way she manages it. And that's actually, there's a report about this, that a lot of people who have these anxiety and these problems, the way to forget is to go and help other people. That's one way you can use as well. So anyway, I mean, I'm going to stop here. There were a few other points I wanted to make, but numerous things from the life of the Prophet ﷺ. Surah Al-Duha, وَالضُّحَى وَاللَّيْلِ إِذَا سَجَى, is a surah that was actually revealed after the Prophet ﷺ was anxious. Because what happened is, after he received the initial wahi, revelation, it stopped. And the people of Makkah started saying that your shaitan has abandoned you. Na'udhu billah, they're talking about Allah. That the one who used to give you these messages, he's abandoned you. And the Prophet is not receiving another message, another wahi. So you can imagine the anxiety. So then when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed this, وَالضُّحَى وَاللَّيْلِ إِذَا سَجَى, he brings the concept of the day. Because nighttime is a gloomy time for a lot of people. People who are anxious, they don't like the night. When it's daytime, they can fare better. So Allah uses that وَالضُّحَى by the morning break, because that brings relief to a lot of people. When you've had a bad night, you just can't, then when the day comes home, alhamdulillah, no shaitan around, no problem. وَاللَّيْلِ إِذَا سَجَى مَا وَدَّعَكَ رَبُّكَ وَمَا قَلَى. Your Lord has not abandoned you. He's not forsaken you. Well, and the akhirah is superior for you than this world. So remember that. وَلَسَوْفَ يُعْطِيكَ رَبُّكَ فَتَرْضَى. And your Lord will soon give you, and you're going to be well satisfied. Then Allah reminds him, and this is a lesson for us, that if you have problems like this about what's happening of your future, think of the good points in your life. Everybody must have some good points in their life. So Allah says, أَلَمْ يَجِدْكَ يَتِيمًا فَآوَى. Didn't Allah find you an orphan? Right? Or didn't He find you an orphan and then He gave you refuge? Right? He gave you a place. And then the others, أَلَمْ يَجِدْكَ يَتِيمًا فَآوَى وَجَدَكَ ضَالًا فَهَدَى وَجَدَكَ عَائِلًا فَأَغْنَى فَأَمَّا الْيَتِيمَ فَلَا تَقْهَرْ. Now, Allah is telling him to do action. The yatim. فَأَمَّا الْيَتِيمَ. Now go and look after the orphans basically. The yatim, the orphan, don't repel them. وَأَمَّا السَّائِلَ فَلَا تَنْهَرْ. Those who need and they come to ask you, do not reject them. وَأَمَّا بِنِعْمَةِ رَبِّكَ فَحَدِّثْ. And the bounties of your Lord, proclaim them. That is the antidote to depression. That is the antidote to anxiety. Right? That firstly, remember your past, good things that have happened in your life. And number 2, start doing some good deeds. So social welfare work is actually something the Prophet ﷺ is being told to do to remove that problem of anxiety. And that is good enough for all of us, inshallah. Right? That is inshallah good enough for all of us. So let me just stop here on that note. Okay, let's make a quick dua and then inshallah we can. Allahumma anta as-salam wa minka as-salam, tabarak ya dhal jalali wal ikram. Allahumma ya hannan ya mannan. لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك إنا كنا من الظالمين. اللهم صل وسلم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم. Oh Allah, we ask you for your blessings. Oh Allah, we ask you for your special attention. Oh Allah, we ask you for your complete forgiveness. Oh Allah, we have many sins and many wrongdoings and shortcomings to our name. Oh Allah, we ask that you forgive us entirely. Oh Allah, especially those sins that has brought difficulties in our life. Oh Allah, we ask forgiveness from those sins that bring calamity in our lives, that have turned our lives into dark messes. Oh Allah, that have turned people against one another, that have caused friction between us. Oh Allah, we ask you complete forgiveness, especially from those sins that have now become part of our life and no longer do we recognize them to be sins. Oh Allah, we ask that all of these brothers and sisters who sit here today, oh Allah, that you do not let them leave without being completely forgiven. Oh Allah, cure us from our physical and our spiritual ailments. Oh Allah, grant us your love in our hearts. Grant us love for your obedience. Grant us hatred for your disobedience. And oh Allah, we ask that you send, you cure our ill among us. And oh Allah, that you grant us all, you make the rest of our lives better than the previous part of our lives. And oh Allah, that you allow us to stand on the day of judgment. And you love to see us and we would love to see you. Oh Allah, grant us the kalima on our deathbed. And finally we ask that you send your abundant blessings on our messenger Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and grant us his company in the hereafter. And you bless all of those who've made this program come to be today. Oh Allah, accept our du'as. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun wa salamun ala al-mursaleen.